Hey everyone, Felix from Nintendo Life here, and have you ever seen yourself in this situation?
Man, I wish this was a mouse.
Yeah, me neither, but actually seeing that mouse reminded me of something. The Switch 2 seemingly has a mouse mode feature, so we thought it would be fun here at Nintendo Live to go back and look at some Switch 1 games that could benefit from a mouse mode update. Also, this video is an adaptation of an article written by Ollie Reynolds on NintendoLive.com. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. And we're starting off with Super Mario Maker 2. If we're being honest, creating custom Mario levels with the Switch's touchscreen, or just the controller in general, never felt quite as satisfying as it did on the Wii U and the 3DS. Thanks in large part to the shift from resistive touchscreens to capacitive, using your finger instead of a stylus was noticeably less precise, not to mention leaving greasy marks all over your Switch's screen. Moving over to a mouse-like solution would not only mitigate this entirely, but it would allow for more precise creation across both docked and tabletop scenarios. Controls could be slightly altered to allow for quick access to critical shortcuts, undo, favorites, and if paired with some sweet HD rumble feedback, it could make for an incredible satisfying tactile experience. World of Goo 2, and indeed its predecessor, has an on-screen cursor, yet unlike other games that feature similar control methods, its GUI gameplay feels incredibly tactile in the way you manipulate goo balls to create structures. Thanks to the pointer controls of the Switch's Joy-Con, which often needs recentering unlike the IR pointer of the original WiiWare version, this gem never shined quite as bright as it could have on the Switch. Yes, you can play with a Pro Controller or via the touchscreen if you'd like, but mouse controls would offer remarkable speed and accuracy. Add in cute little jiggle feedback from the HD Rumble whenever you add a new blob of goo, and we reckon you're onto a winner. And another game we feel could use some mouse support is Disco Elysium: The Final Cut. We have very few problems with the excellent Disco Elysium on Switch, but one of the drawbacks of the console release was having to cycle through interactable objects until you stumble upon the one you actually want. Sometimes you'd get lucky and land on it straight away, others you'd be fumbling with the right analog stick, moving up, down, left and right for ages. It should be obvious how mouse controls along the lines of the original PC and Mac release would alleviate this. Simply slide an on-screen cursor directly over an item or NPC. It's one of those few issues that hold the Switch version back from true perfection. Then we have Splatoon 3. If you come across someone who's especially skilled in Splatoon 3, then chances are they are using a combination of analog and gyro controls. Truly mastering this setup makes Splatoon 3 an absolute joy, giving you total precision over your shots and movement. That said, it can sometimes be a bit awkward twisting your controller around during heated battles. Mouse controls would effectively mimic the gyro setup in classic PC style, but you could simply use the right Joy-Con as a mouse while keeping the left solely for analog movement. Now, a big caveat here would then be a potential haves and have-not situation. Who's going to want to play competitively on the OG Switch if Switch 2 players are rocking a potentially more adventurous control scheme? So perhaps it's a bit late for Splatoon 3. Splatoon 4, on the other hand... Oh, I know Sion will be pleased to hear this one. The World Ends With You Final Remix. Games that focus so heavily on the Switch's touchscreen can be a bit tricky to translate into other control methods. The general consensus around this game is that while it's a fine port of an excellent DS game, the move to capacitive touchscreen on on-screen pointer in dock mode, in addition to condensing all the action onto a single display, make it a slightly lesser version of the original. A lot of the action obscured by your finger could be revealed nicely if we made the pointer controls the default option while docked and use a Joy-Con mouse to move it around. It might be a bit finicky since there's a lot of gestures to contend with during heated battles, but making the action easier to pass would be a big step in the right direction. And next up we have Quake 2. FPS games flourished on PC with traditional mouse and keyboard setups, and we reckon that the Switch 2 could simulate this well with the new Joy-Con. And let's not forget, Quake already supports mouse control on Switch. The game already boasts a pretty flawless control setup that includes optional gyro aiming, but there's no denying that the movement of the mouse would introduce even more precision. Night Dive has been great about post-launch patches and support, and we could totally imagine the devs going back and adding this to the first 2 entries. Or perhaps to a hypothetical port of Quake 3 Arena. Naturally, the benefits of mouse control could apply to most first-person shooter games on Switch, including the likes of Doom Eternal, Wolfenstein 2 The New Colossus, Killing Time Resurrected, and yes, perhaps even Metroid Prime Remastered. And this is probably the game that I would love to see mouse mode included in the most. Return to Monkey Island. Pretty much any point-and-click adventure game on Switch would benefit from mouse controls, and Return to Monkey Island was simply the first that came to mind. Games like Locomotive, Grim Fandango, Thimbleweed Park, The Dark Side Detective, they all stick close to that classic blueprint, so implementing mouse controls would easily make them more approachable for players looking to transition from the PC versions. The touchscreen made this genre a perfect fit for the Switch, so adding the functionality for TV play would make it the ultimate point-and-click machine. We're following that up with a game that I think a lot of people would love to see mouse support in. Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic. When we recently reviewed this game, we lamented the lack of touchscreen controls for a game that otherwise depended solely on an on-screen cursor, something that Atari has said it's keen to address. But goodness, could you imagine using mouse controls instead? Touchscreen functionality would certainly improve the game, but using mouse mode to move a cursor would be immeasurably more enjoyable. The game is, after all, bringing back a PC classic from 1999 and 2002, one that veteran fans are intimately familiar with. Why not make the transition over to the Switch 2 as easy as possible? Makes sense to us. Oh, that's a funny title. Aka. This game requires lightning-fast reflexes and precise aiming at all times. Despite its somewhat relaxed visual aesthetics, the latter levels in particular can descend into utter chaos, and if you're not careful, you'll wind up back on the main menu time and time again. It has you moving an on-screen cursor to shoot down invading enemies and defend your central tower. Developer Llamasoft fine-tuned the movement speed well enough that it feels relatively zippy without losing too much accuracy. But it's still no replacement for the traditional mouse input. Just imagine the kind of high scores you can achieve with mouse mode. And next up we have Danganronpa Descendants. You may not think that Danganronpa or other games in the visual novel category would necessarily need mouse controls to be enjoyable, and to give it credit, it does work well as it is. But in our opinion, almost every core gameplay mechanic could potentially benefit from mouse input. Think about it. You need to investigate scenes within the school with an on-screen cursor, navigate the hallways in first-person mode, and quickly select moving words or phrases during the courtroom sessions. All of these scenarios would just be easier with a mouse setup. Oh, another one that's just so obvious. Civilization 6. This game did a good job at translating the series to Switch, with the left analog stick allowing for movement on the on-screen indicator, while the right lets you pan across the scenery and jump the cursor over the center of the screen. Let's be honest though, any strategy game worth its salt is best used with proper mouse control. You could shift the camera pan to a single analog stick and boom, it's a slightly stripped back version of the classic mouse and keyboard setup on PC, but it would actually allow for more intuitive navigation. And we're following it up with Romance of the Three Kingdoms 8 Remake. Much like the earlier entries from Koei Tecmo, this game relies heavily on menu navigation and selection as you manage an obscene number of unique characters. The game does a good job of presenting relevant information without completely overwhelming you, but cycling through options threatens to become tedious after a while.
But what's the answer?
Asked absolutely nobody at this point watching this video. Next game. And this one is an obvious one, but it's certainly a game that could benefit greatly from mouse support. Do you really need us to explain why? Okay, we will anyway. Stardew Valley places a lot of emphasis on its on-screen cursor to complete objectives, manage your inventory, and generally keep your farm running. So naturally, moving this with a mouse would prove infinitely more intuitive than an analog stick. Also, one of the more common complaints with this beloved game is that the indicator used to show the patch of land you're about to interact with can sometimes go haywire, especially frustrating when you're performing more delicate tasks. Mouse Mode to the rescue. And there you have it. Those were some Switch games that we felt could really use a mouse mode update. Were there any games that we missed? Well, let us know down in the comments below. Don't forget to check out our website, NintendoLoft.com, where you can find Ollie Reynolds' original article. Link to it down in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, why don't you give that subscribe button a little click with your mouse? I mean, touchscreen also works, it might just not be as precise. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one. Felix from Nintendo Life, out. Hey everyone, Felix.